The United States of America, the world's leading economy, its most powerful military force, the very definition of a superpower. Which is why it's easy to forget that this country nearly fell apart over and over and over again. What explains the success of the United States? Some people say it's just some beneficial geography, 2 oceans protecting us from enemies, lots of productive land, lengthy coastlines facilitating trade with both Europe and Asia. Some people, not just Americans, say it's a kind of divine protection. The German Chancellor, Otto von Bismarck, is often quoted as having said, "God has a special providence for fools, drunkards, and the United States of America." Though it's not clear that he ever actually said that. And if he did, it probably didn't sound nearly as catchy in German. Some people say it's about our vast array of natural resources, endless supplies of things like oil, timber, gold, Baldwin brothers. But all of these explanations are probably a little too pat. After all, it's easy to look at what America has become and just assume that it was destined to be this way from the get-go. But here's the thing, there was a pretty good case for betting against us from the get-go. Think about America in 1776, a series of colonies, most of which didn't like or trust each other, pinned between the Atlantic seaboard on one side and a vast, mostly untamed wilderness on the other. It's a collection of only 2.5 million people, 95% of whom are farmers, that's decided it's going to war with the British Empire because of a dispute over taxes. And its big opening gambit is the Boston Tea Party. Which, not for nothing, having a bunch of guys in ridiculous costumes getting worked up over tea is maybe not the best way to prove you're different than the British. Anyway, you probably would have bet on Americans to lose this war, and yet, somehow, we pulled it off. Even after that, however, the odds still seemed pretty good that we'd screw things up. After all, within just a few years of the Revolution's end, our system of government was falling apart. The problem was that our governing document, the Articles of Confederation, was so weak that it basically didn't give the federal government any power stronger than being able to tell New York it had to be nice to New Jersey, which, let's be honest, doesn't even work today. And yet not only did we avoid collapse, we replaced the Articles of Confederation with what turned out to be the most successful governing document of all time, the U.S. Constitution. And let's be clear, that seemed like an insane thing to do at the time. The world had basically no representative or democratic governments in the late 1700s. Constitutions, though a few had existed in the past, had never before been used as the sole basis for an entire national government, and even many of the founding fathers worried that the system was doomed to fail. Even 15 years after the Constitution was enacted, Alexander Hamilton was referring to it as a frail and worthless fabric. And yet, it has lasted longer than any other constitution in the world. And yes, we know some people argue San Marino's constitution is even older, but 1, it's not really a constitution, and 2, even if it was, we wouldn't count it because San Marino is a country about half the size of Disney World. And here's what's so crazy about our constitution lasting for so long. There were lots of good arguments for why it wouldn't. After all, many of the founding fathers had a justifiable fear that an American president would simply seize power, rule like a king. And yet the country got, as its first president, George Washington, who, at a time when many Americans wanted him to remain in power forever, made a point to give up power after 2 terms and tell the country that it wasn't dependent on any one leader for its success. There was also the fact that the Constitution hadn't resolved the issue of slavery. As we barreled towards the middle of the 1800s, it looked likely that this would finally be the issue that destroyed America. And if you looked at America's leadership during this era, you'd be forgiven for expecting the worst. Our presidents in the run-up to the Civil War included Millard Fillmore, a man most famous for lending his name to a cartoon duck, Franklin Pierce, best known for being America's most handsome president, and also its drunkest, and James Buchanan, who, when southern states started seceding, took the position that that was illegal, and also that there was nothing the federal government could do about it, which felt like game over. And yet the Union was saved, and slavery was ended, thanks to the American people's choice to replace Buchanan with an obscure Illinois lawyer who hadn't held elected office in a dozen years, and ended up arguably America's greatest president. And look, this trend of improbable success isn't just ancient history. America is still beating the odds today. After all, the idea that a country made up of all different races, religions, and creeds can hold together if its people all just cling to a common set of ideals seems hopelessly idealistic. History is full of countries that tore themselves apart due to racial, ethnic, or cultural tensions. Why hasn't it happened in America? Because we actually believe what our founding documents say. In 2021, 92% of Americans told pollsters that being a real American meant accepting people of diverse racial and religious backgrounds. 93% said it meant believing that every citizen has the right to vote. And 95% said it meant believing in individual freedoms, which is probably the real lesson here. America's success wasn't foreordained because of geography, divine providence, or natural resources. America has succeeded because of Americans, because we're relentlessly optimistic, because in the moments it really matters, we step up, because we actually believe those words in the Declaration of Independence. And also because we build theme parks bigger than entire European countries. Just because we can.